Well,
Wally, besides football, like junior and senior, did you coach other sports when you were teaching in high school?
myself,
Yeah.
yes,
I,
football, wrestling, and track. My favorite sport to coach was wrestling. To this day, it's still wrestling. One on one, no distractions, and the competition itself is just man against man, woman against woman. And dealing with them, it just took out all the baggage in a one on one setting that you didn't have to deal with in team sports. Now, in high school, there was no baggage for me because I coached in the way that I felt was the right way ethically, and it got results that kept me, um, that I could be proud of. But more important than that, the ethical side of it is uh, where I found, developed that kind of philosophical roots. But football, wrestling, and track, I learned to coaching other sports. But at the same time, I made a point of really pursuing the education pieces. Doing the hockey was one thing, but the most important part of my education, by far more useful, was theory one, two, and three, and the modules that I completed in theory four. And I have to say that the theory four modules, I only got to complete them because Dave King would send me to the courses on the weekends they were on in Toronto because he was coaching. He didn't have time to go. So I would take a module or two modules on a weekend, come back, and the mental training module for coaches and the mental training module for players, I put into my school curriculum in a sports psych 10, 20, and 30 format and played with it all the time with my phys ed classes and applied it with my students. So, coaching football, wrestling, and track, individual sports, boys and girls, uh, I really had a laboratory to experiment with. And Tim, when I was with the national team, I had a vision about every national player goes to a school, a high school. High school teachers are physically educated, kinesiology, biomechanics, and all the resources we acquired by coaching the national team, they needed to be in their hands. So those modules I played with, learned from, and applied as a coach with the national team. And then what I learned from the experts there, it's just a wealth of information. The high school sports setting, grade 10 to 12, they can make a bigger difference with the kids that get into phys ed 30. They're, they're going to be your athletes that are going to be elite. Not all of them, but many of them will go on. And I just, that was one of my visions, was being on the national team, having taught school, and trying to share that with the high school phys ed departments, going through the whether it's the Catholic school system or the public system, going through the uh, sports leaders. That was sort of a wishful thinking module to do that I was able to live with and experiment with for 20, well, not, it would have been about 15 years when I was working with Dave in the 80s. Yeah. So that sort of explains a little bit of the background of where I came from on coaching.
and how many years coaching all those sports like football, track, wrestling? How many years did you coach them all every year? There's all three sports, or
I coached football, wrestling, and track. I would say there was a 7 year period where I did all three with hockey. And I'm sort of saying over 15 years, I had a 3-sport coaching experience. And I believe I might have even had 20 years of coaching experience. It started out with one sport only, and gradually I took on more sports. And
Nice.
I think Wally.
Yeah.
Like I remember when the U.S. won the gold over Russia, we were both coaching wrestling in a wrestling tournament, and the game was on at one of the high schools. I can't remember which one, but I went in the staff room and I watched the hockey game. You were out there coaching your wrestlers, so I knew nothing about wrestling. I just kind of volunteered to do the wrestling so the wrestlers could wrestle. And but anyways, in high school, I high school 2 years I did football, wrestling, and track. But in junior high, I was 22 years in junior high. I coached every imaginable sport. You know, volleyball, basketball, badminton, gymnastics. So it's quite the experience. You know, it really teaches you. Every sport has its, like wrestling is incredible, the training they do and stuff. Every sport has its kind of thing that transfers. So when you're a hockey coach, you can draw from all of those things. So that was a good experience.
I think I was in a bar in Minneapolis when 1980 game.
I thought you were going to say you're in the bar like most of the years.
I was playing with the Rangers then. Yeah, I think it was post game or something. Anyway.
Well, I was kind of looking in to see. I'm expecting the Americans to get beat because they got beat like 10-1 2 days before or something, I think, by the Russians. And I didn't expect them to get beat. And then they keep hanging in there and playing pretty good. So I jump back and forth all the time just to see it. And then when it was right to the crux, I just stayed in the staff room till it was over.
I think
I was young enough to be a participant in that tournament that you guys were coaching in. The wrestling tournament.
What was that, Tim?
No, I said I think I was young enough to be a participant in that wrestling tournament that you two guys were coaching in.